The northeast kingdom of Vermont, a vast, rugged expanse of forested wilderness and sparse towns where silence is as thick as the towering pines, and the night holds secrets few dare to uncover. It was here, in September 2018, that two teenagers vanished without a trace, setting off one of the most perplexing investigations in recent memory. Ilera Vance and Calder Reese were both 17, inseparable friends craving adventure beyond their small-town lives. They had been drawn together by tales of an off-grid sanctuary hidden deep within the remote forests of the Northeast Kingdom, a place where a small community lived free from the watchful eyes of society, in harmony with nature and technology left behind. Ilera, with her sharp green eyes and sun-streaked chestnut hair, had always been the dreamer. Calder, sturdy and thoughtful, was her steadfast protector. Their plan was reckless, but it felt like freedom, to disappear into the wilderness, to leave behind the constrictions of their lives, even if only for a short time. The last anyone saw of them was near a secluded campsite on an overgrown logging road, miles from the nearest paved highway. Their tent was found standing but abandoned, the fire pit-cold. Nearby lay shattered glasses, a grim sign of struggle or accident. Tire tracks, narrow and unusual, circled the site, hinting at a third presence. Their disappearance was immediate, baffling. The initial search was immense, mobilizing local authorities, volunteers, and eventually state police. But the wilderness was merciless, hiding all traces beneath its thick canopy. Days turned into weeks. Then, an anonymous online contact emerged, a user claiming to be part of the off-grid community Ilera and Calder had hoped to find. Coordinates sent by this user matched the general area of the campsite, reigniting hope. Investigators raced to verify the lead, chasing the possibility that the teenagers were alive and had willingly joined the secretive enclave. But the lead went cold. The user vanished, wiping their digital footprint clean. The technology that promised connection instead spun a web of dead ends. Amid mounting frustration, investigators examined the tire tracks more closely. They consulted the U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers, familiar with the porous Vermont-Canada border. The tracks belonged to a specialized utility vehicle used in smuggling operations, narrow, durable, capable of navigating trails too small for trucks. This revelation transformed the case. The disappearance was no longer isolated but tangled in international crime, a hidden world of trafficking and smuggling spanning dense forests and shadow trails. The days following discovery of the campsite and the unsettling tire tracks saw the investigation pivot sharply. What had begun as a missing persons case in the wilds of Vermont was morphing into something far more sinister and complex. Dorian Vex. The name emerged quietly at first, tucked away in a dusty file deep inside a federal database. A man whose movements matched the kind of shadowy, cross-border activity the authorities had long suspected but never fully mapped in his rugged stretch of the Northeast Kingdom. Dorian was no ordinary man. A recent immigrant from Eastern Europe, his past was stitched with fragments of rumors, elusive traces in international law enforcement files, and whispers of connections to organized crime syndicates known for ruthlessness and secrecy. Though he kept a low profile, those who knew the underworld spoke of him in hushed tones. A man skilled in moving contraband through impossible terrain, a ghost who left no witnesses. The apartment where Dorian lived was as enigmatic as the man himself, a third-floor unit in a rundown Burlington complex. Window panes covered with thick black plastic to block any light, a hum of heavy ventilation equipment masking sound within. His electricity usage was abnormally high for such a modest space, raising eyebrows among the local utility company. Surveillance teams were deployed. Officers staked out the building day and night, noting the ebb and flow of Dorian's movements. He was meticulous, alert, and evasive, driving rental cars that changed frequently and doubling back to spot anyone following him. His behavior was textbook counter-surveillance, a professional who knew how to slip through cracks in the system. But it was not just his behavior that captured investigators' attention. It was what they could not see, the shadows that danced just beyond the reach of their cameras, the persistent smell of disinfectant wafting from beneath his door, and the whisper of something trapped within. Meanwhile, the families of Ilera and Calder wrestled with the growing nightmare. Grant and Maris Vance, Ilera's parents, lived in a state of frozen hope and despair. Their daughter, bright, full of life, now became a symbol of the darkness swallowing the Northeast Kingdom. Sterling and Isolde Reese, Calder's parents, clung to memories of their son's laughter and steady presence, grappling with a sudden, devastating uncertainty. The investigation uncovered a chilling pattern. Dorian Vex was believed to be part of a sophisticated human trafficking network, exploiting the vast, poorly monitored Vermont-Canada border. The network used remote logging roads and forest trails to smuggle people, and sometimes worse, into Canada, out of the reach of U.S. authorities. The smuggling routes were labyrinthine and deadly. One wrong step could mean death or capture by merciless criminals. And the Northeast Kingdom's unforgiving wilderness was both shield and trap. Yet, for all their efforts, no concrete evidence tied Dorian directly to the disappearance of Alara and Calder. The connection was circumstantial but compelling. A man living in secrecy, operating in the very area where the teenagers vanished, whose smuggling activities aligned with the timeline. As the weeks passed, investigators intensified their surveillance and began searching Dorian's apartment under carefully obtained warrants. Every inch was scrutinized, but the door to the second bedroom remained locked, reinforced, and soundproofed. A room designed to hold a captive or a secret. The pressure mounted as news spread. The local community grew restless, whispers turning into rumors, rumors into fear. The missing teenagers became more than just a case. They became a symbol of vulnerability in a place thought safe, a reminder that the wilderness was not always a sanctuary. In this shadowy world of secrets and lies, every new clue pulled investigators deeper into a labyrinth of danger. What lurked behind a reinforced door? What horrors had Alara and Calder fallen into? The answers lay just beyond reach, tangled in the cold, dark silence of the Northeast Kingdom. The tactical team assembled quietly in the early hours, just before dawn. Outside the third-floor apartment in Burlington, the world still slept, unaware that its darkest secrets were about to be torn open. The stakes were high. A man suspected of ties to ruthless criminal networks, a locked door concealing an unknown terror, and two missing teenagers whose lives hung in the balance. Dorian Vex Unit had become the focal point of the investigation. Surveillance had painted a clear picture. A man living in shadows, skilled at evasion, but burdened by a dangerous secret. The time for waiting was over. The team moved with precision, the sound of the battering ram slicing through the stillness. The reinforced door splintered under the blow, revealing the dim, oppressive interior. Dorian was caught off guard. His reaction was violent and desperate, a fierce struggle that took several officers to subdue. His rage filled the room, but it was hollow, a mask for something far darker lurking beneath. The apartment was a grim reflection of his mind. Sparse, cold, and clinical. Thick black plastic covered the windows, and a sophisticated ventilation system hummed relentlessly, filtering the stale air. The main living area was almost bare, save for a faint scent of disinfectant mingled with the odor of long neglect. The first bedroom offered little, a stark sleeping space where Dorian apparently spent most of his time. But the second bedroom was an ominous contrast. A heavy door, multiple locks, and soundproofing that muffled every sound from within. It was a prison cell hidden inside an apartment. With deliberate care, the officers breached the second door. What they found was nothing short of horrifying. The room was small and suffocating, bathed in perpetual darkness despite the harsh overhead light. The air was thick with the stench of human suffering, sweat, fear, and neglect woven into a suffocating haze. In one corner, chained to a metal fixture bolted to the floor, was Alara Vance. She was alive, but the years of captivity had stolen much from her. Her body was frail, pale, bruised, skin mottled from malnutrition and confinement. Her blonde hair hung in tangled matted strands, eyes wide with terror, flickering with disbelief at the sudden intrusion. Her trembling form seemed both fragile and infinitely strong, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit amid cruelty. Medical personnel rushed in, their voices calm and soothing as they began the slow process of stabilizing her. She barely responded, caught in the fog of trauma that had become her existence. Dorian's apartment, the carefully concealed prison, spoke volumes about his depravity. The ventilation system, the soundproofing, the fortified door, all designed to hold a captive indefinitely, to erase hope and crush resistance. The discovery shattered the thin line between hope and despair for the families and investigators alike. But where was Calder Reese? The second missing teenager remained unaccounted for. Dorian's defiant silence when questioned about Calder's whereabouts only deepened the mystery and darkened the investigation. Under relentless interrogation, Dorian cracked, confessing to Alara's abduction and Calder's murder. His admission was chillingly devoid of remorse, as if the gravity of his crimes had long eroded any vestige of humanity. Yet when pressed on the location of Calder's body, his answers became evasive, riddled with lies and cold dismissals. He claimed to have forgotten, a hollow excuse that further enraged the families and investigators. The hunt for Calder's remains became a desperate race against time, the dense forests and rugged wilderness of the Northeast Kingdom offering a vast, merciless hiding place. As Alara began the agonizing journey toward recovery, physically and psychologically, the community braced for the grim task of uncovering the full extent of Dorian Veck's crimes. The horrors lurking behind that soundproof door exposed a chilling truth. Evil can hide in the quietest places, and the cost of silence is measured in shattered lives. Alara's arrival at the University of Vermont Medical Center was shrouded in urgency and quiet chaos. Doctors, nurses, and trauma specialists prepared to receive the girl who had emerged from the shadows of captivity. Her physical condition was critical. Severe dehydration, malnourishment, and wounds both visible and hidden beneath layers of psychological torment. As medical staff worked tirelessly to stabilize her, the walls of the hospital whispered with a mixture of relief and horror. Alara's survival was miraculous, but it was just the beginning. For days, Alara lay in a haze, drifting between consciousness and the oppressive fog of trauma. Her mind recoiled from the memories, a brutal defense mechanism that protected her fragile psyche. She couldn't speak at first. The silence in her eyes told a story deeper than words, a story of fear, loss, and the unimaginable cruelty inflicted upon her. Detective Avery Cole was assigned to lead the case, a seasoned investigator hardened by years of confronting humanity's darkest corners. She understood the delicate balance between pressing for information and allowing space for healing. When Alara finally found the strength to speak, her voice was barely above a whisper, fractured, hesitant, but undeniable. She recounted the events at the remote campsite deep in the Northeast Kingdom. The peaceful setting, the crisp September air, the crackling campfire, the sense of youthful freedom, had been shattered by a sudden, brutal intrusion. Dorian Vex had emerged from the woods without warning. His presence was like a shadow falling over clearing, armed, aggressive, and merciless. Alara described the terror that gripped her as she watched Calder, impaired by the effects of the stony patch edibles they had taken, tried desperately to fight back and protect her. The struggle was violent, chaotic, and brief. Calder's glasses had been knocked off, shattered near the rocky ravine, and he was quickly overpowered. Alara's voice faltered as she described the unthinkable, witnessing Calder's murder at the hands of Dorian. She had no time to process the horror before she was dragged from the wilderness and forced into the grim confines of the soundproof cell. Her testimony painted a stark picture of a man who was methodical and cold, part of a sprawling human trafficking network that used the vast, rugged borderlands to smuggle victims across international lines. Dorian's apartment was not an isolated anomaly. It was a carefully crafted node in a larger, more sinister operation. The high electricity usage, the blacked-out windows, the complex ventilation system, all signs of location designed for long-term imprisonment and concealment. As the investigation unfolded, Avery and her team worked to trace the tangled web of Dorian's connections. International law enforcement agencies were brought in, and the once sparse details began to fill with chilling clarity. The Northeast Kingdom's rugged wilderness, beautiful, remote, and often overlooked, was a corridor for illicit activities. Smugglers, traffickers, and criminals exploited the dense forests and countless hidden trails to move people and goods with impunity. Dorian's arrest was just the first fracture in what promised to be a sprawling, complex case. The challenge ahead was enormous. Dismantle the network, find Calder's remains, and bring justice to those who had suffered. Meanwhile, Alara's family, Grant and Maris Vance, grappled with the terrifying relief of her rescue and the overwhelming uncertainty about Calder. Their home was a sanctuary filled with cautious hope and whispered prayers. Sterling and Isolde Reese, Calder's parents, were consumed by grief and determination, channeling their anguish into the relentless search for answers. Ilara's recovery was slow and fragile. The medical team emphasized not only physical healing, but also psychological care. The trauma she endured had fractured her sense of safety, identity, and trust. Detective Cole remained a constant presence, a steady figure who balanced empathy with a steely resolve to see the case through. In the shadows beyond hospital walls, the human trafficking network trembled. Arrests and raids rippled outward. But for every step taken toward justice, there were layers of secrecy and silence to unravel. The story of Ilara and Calder, once two teenagers seeking adventure in the wilderness, had become a haunting testament to resilience, cruelty, and the fight for truth in the face of darkness. The days after Dorian Veck's arrest were a turbulent mix of breakthroughs and setbacks. Ilara's fragile testimony had opened a window into the hidden world of human trafficking that operated under the radar of quiet Vermont countryside. Yet, the deeper the investigation went, the more complex the web of corruption and silence appeared. Detective Avery Cole pored over intercepted communications, financial records, and surveillance footage. Each piece pointed to a network far larger, more sophisticated than initially imagined, a network that spanned international borders, involving smugglers, corrupt officials, and shadowy intermediaries. In the safe confines of a secured facility, Ilara began the painstaking process of confronting her trauma. With the help of specialized therapists, she started to piece together fragmented memories, each revelation a small step toward reclaiming her stolen life. But the psychological scars were deep. Nightmares haunted her sleep. Moments of panic jolted her awake, reminding her of the cell where she had been held captive. Meanwhile, the search for Calder's remains remained agonizingly elusive. Despite exhaustive efforts, no trace of him had been found. The wilderness that had witnessed a tragedy seemed to guard its secrets jealously, and the cold reality settled in. Calder might never be recovered. The Vance and Reese families navigated a complex landscape of grief, hope, and justice. They leaned on each other, their shared pain forging an unbreakable bond. Grant and Maris Vance dedicated themselves to supporting Ilara's recovery, while Sterling and Isolde Reese channeled their sorrow into advocacy, raising awareness about the dangers lurking near the border. Back in Burlington, the ripple effects of the case began to change the community. Law enforcement agencies increased patrols along known smuggling routes. Local organizations stepped up support for trafficking survivors. Yet, a shadow of fear lingered, the knowledge that such darkness had been hidden in their midst. Ilara's story became a beacon, shining light on the unseen horrors that many preferred to ignore. But for her, every step forward was a battle against the memories of captivity, the loss of Calder, and the daunting road ahead.